Welcome to the Agility in Real Life podcast, Take 5 in Real Life. Now your hosts, Mike Studeman, Jeff Lee, and Pat Campbell.
Hello and welcome back to the Take 5 IRL podcast. I'm Jeff Lee, one of the partners at agilityIRL and one of your hosts.
And I'm Patrick Campbell, one of the newer partners at agilityIRL, and your other host today.
Yeah, so Pat, before we were in this world of agility and got into Agile, you and I were both project managers, PMP certified. We still carry those credentials, but we were working on projects that somehow got prioritized and got to us. And want to talk a little bit about that whole process. Like, what's a good way to prioritize projects? What's a good way for organizations to work around this? What are your thoughts? How do you want to take this?
Well, I remember those days, as do you, and I still carry those credentials so I can avoid taking that exam again, just like
Yeah, I don't want
yourself.
to do that either.
But that was, that was interesting to try to figure out, how did they come up with the priorities of these projects that we were handed, and B, how is this being effectively managed as a group of projects? I mean, we remember the red, yellow, green, that was assigned to them, and how did they come up with the priorities? It was always kind of in the back of our minds. And
I imagine some people listening to this podcast right now are having some nightmares as they're trying to figure out what status to put their project for next week's status report.
could be, or even just have their faces in their hands, shaking their heads, like we used to. But yeah, you remember those frustrations, and also the the idea that we would get the help we need when we raised flags, which wasn't always forthcoming either. I mean, sometimes we needed resources, but they'd already been parceled out across all the portfolio. In fact, probably twice parceled, and without thinking about capacity planning. So
Yeah, so you use the word portfolio. What are you talking about with portfolio?
well, when you have unlimited demand of projects with ideas from the business and a limited budget, you've got to come up with some way to prioritize, select, and then manage those projects or whatever, in order to maximize the outcome and minimize the cost. And so project portfolio management came about as a discipline of centralized management of the processes, the methods, the technologies used by project managers and project management offices. And how do you analyze and manage, the current group of both existing and proposed projects? And that's the idea behind project portfolio management. So you've got selection prioritization, you got resource allocation, you got risk management, you've got monitoring and control, and then optimization typically going on. But those are tied to projects. And as you and I know, there are some challenges with investing large amounts of resources in long-term efforts, trying to deliver value incrementally or not. So it inherits some of those limitations that projects have.
Yeah, I
And
remember working in environments where we have from a business group or someone outside of like the PMO or the tech organization is putting together a business case to justify, hey, I want you to do this project for me. And then it goes into the PMO who's got their own committee to figure out, okay, you've done the work to figure out if this is a value. You're saying it's a value. Now we're going to decide if it's a value from kind of a centralized PMO before allocating resources. Is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about something else?
no, that's exactly it. And every company has done it a little bit differently. They've tried to establish some consistency, but again, they're inheriting the weaknesses associated with project thinking. And there are some alternatives that we'll talk about in our next podcast. One of them is called lean portfolio management that addresses some of those challenges.
Yeah, I know with the one company I worked with, which will remain nameless, the business justification of every project that came in was basically, we're going to lay off 40 people from our call center. And the call center growed, every year, right? It kept getting bigger. So it was like, hey, here's our business case, but we never monitored it. We never saw, are we actually getting this value we said we were going to get out of it?
Yep. Closing that loop.
Queuing up our next topic here, getting into lean portfolio management. Do you want to define that a little bit of where we're going next?
Yeah, so lean portfolio management is a strategic approach to managing that effort and investment that any organization has, trying to align it better with a company's strategic objectives, do a better job of resource allocation, aligning the investments with value streams as opposed to projects, which makes it more long running and yet maximizing the value on a shorter term basis, say a quarterly basis. So there's a lot of aspects to it that are different than what we've seen in traditional project portfolio management.
All right. So queuing up, our next few episodes here are going to be around this concept of lean portfolio management, figure out how to get the value, how to get it quickly, how to get those quick feedback loops like Pat talked about. So thanks for joining us on this week's episode of the Take 5 IRL. Hope to see you soon in our next edition on the lean portfolio management series.
Until next time.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Take 5 IRL podcast. If you like it, please go ahead and share it with someone, as well as like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Also, leave us a comment or a suggestion for a future episode. Again, thanks for listening, and we look forward to you joining us next time on the Take 5 IRL podcast.